Annette Daniel, the 63-year-old mother of mob boss Stephen Bonzo Daniel, and sister of the late kingpin Jamie Daniel, was recently facing charges in court that had nothing to do with drugs, guns, or the bloodshed her family is famous for. Everyone thought this was it. Finally, the crime queen would be heading to prison where she belonged. But, true to the Daniel name, she walked out completely free. And not even on bail. Every single charge on her recently was mysteriously wiped away. What could she have possibly done that was so ordinary it seemed almost absurd compared to her family's violent reputation? The shocking part is that she didn't need the family's criminal network or their blood money to escape justice. Somehow, this grandmother managed to beat the system, using something far more unexpected than anyone could have imagined. How did a Daniel walk away from prison this time? And more importantly, what did she do? Well, when it comes to the Daniel crime clan, headlines are usually filled with drugs, firebombings, and revenge killings. But Annette Daniel has made her name in court for something entirely different. She has now been accused of shoplifting 3 separate times, and each time, she has walked out free. In August 2025, the woman who raised Bonzo Daniel and watched her brother Jamie build a criminal empire worth millions was standing trial for stealing cashmere jumpers. Not drug dealing or money laundering. She just stole jumpers. Each one was worth over £100 from the White Company, which she allegedly took on the 12th of October 2023. For a family that moved cocaine by the kilo and controlled half of Glasgow's underworld, it seemed like pocket change. So why risk it all for knitwear? That question had been haunting prosecutors since 2018 when Annette first appeared on shoplifting charges. Back then it was curtains and bedding from Next, worth £200. The case could not keep her behind bars as there was not much evidence. In 2024, she was accused of taking handbags from House of Fraser. That case fell apart too. Now here she was again, and the Crown was convinced they finally had her trapped. What made this case different was Roberta Burke. Annette's alleged partner in crime had already confessed and was heading to jail for 2 months. If Burke was guilty, surely Annette was too. The prosecution felt confident. They had witnesses, they had testimony, and they had someone who had already admitted the crime happened. How could this possibly go wrong? But yes, it did. Not for Annette though. Shop assistant manager Melissa Law took the stand first, and her story seemed true. She claimed she watched Annette walk into the store with several jumpers, hand them off to another woman in the changing rooms, then hang around near the cash registers. The other woman left, setting off the store alarm, while Annette slipped out minutes later. It looked coordinated and planned. But looking guilty and proving guilt are 2 very different things, especially when your last name is Daniel. Anyone who had followed this family's legal battles knew that cases which seemed watertight had a strange way of springing leaks once they reached court. The Daniel name carried weight in Glasgow, and not just because of their criminal reputation. There was something about their court appearances that defied normal legal logic. The prosecution's case started cracking when Supervisor Chloe McGill took the witness stand. What she said next would destroy everything the Crown had built. McGill admitted she had spoken to police about the incident, but couldn't remember the details. Why? Because shoplifting was so common at their store that the police visited every month. Those words were prosecutorial poison. If thefts happened so often that even supervisors couldn't tell them apart, how could anyone prove Annette was part of this specific crime? Maybe she was just unlucky timing. Maybe she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suddenly, their solid evidence became Swiss cheese. The defense didn't need to do much work. The prosecution was destroying itself. By lunchtime, Crown lawyer Tammy Gibson was facing a nightmare scenario. Her key witness couldn't remember crucial details, her evidence was circumstantial at best, and her accused confession was not enough to drag Annette down with her. Gibson did what any smart prosecutor would do, she threw in the towel. Sheriff Alan McKay turned to Annette and delivered the words she had heard twice before: not guilty, complete acquittal. She walked out of Glasgow Sheriff Court a free woman while Roberta Burke headed to prison. The same crime, 2 different outcomes, and nobody seemed surprised anymore. But where the story gets really interesting is that while Annette was fighting shoplifting charges, her family was fighting for their lives. This was not just another legal drama. It was happening against the backdrop of Scotland's most vicious gang war in decades. The woman accused of stealing jumpers was living in a war zone where people were trying to kill her relatives. Just months before her latest trial, Annette's own home in Bishopbriggs had been firebombed. Videos of the attack spread online like wildfire, flames ripping through her property in the middle of the night. Her brother Norman's bungalow was torched minutes later. The message was sent by Ross Miami McGill, and who made sure to let them know that the Daniels were marked for death. It was Ross's Tamo Junto crew who was behind the violence, and it was part of a feud that had already claimed multiple lives. Think about that for a moment. Annette was supposed to appear in court to defend herself against accusations of stealing handbags while enemies were literally burning down her house. At one point, she even missed a hearing because her lawyer said she was too afraid to show up. She was not just paranoid, her survival instinct was in overdrive. The contrast was almost surreal. Here was a woman connected to one of Scotland's most dangerous crime families, supposedly risking everything to steal department store merchandise while dodging assassination attempts. It raised uncomfortable questions about the justice system's priorities. Were prosecutors really spending resources chasing a grandmother over jumpers while gang members were setting houses on fire? What made Annette's repeated acquittals even more controversial was the timing. Every court appearance happened during escalating violence between rival factions. Every case collapsed while her family was being targeted by enemies who wanted them dead. Every acquittal came while the Crown struggled to make basic shoplifting charges stick against someone whose surname alone struck fear into Glasgow's underworld. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. 3 cases, 3 different prosecutors, 3 complete failures. Either the Crown was incredibly unlucky with evidence, or something else was happening here. What everyone did know was that Annette Daniel had mastered the art of walking away. She has beaten the system 3 times now, using nothing more than weak prosecution cases and convenient memory lapses. Whether that was luck, skill, or some clever blackmailing depended on who you asked. But maybe she needed all the luck in the world at this time because things are really not good at home. While Annette was dodging shoplifting charges, her family was dodging bullets and bombs in what had become Scotland's deadliest gang war in decades. The firebombing of her house was not some random attack. It was a cold and calculated revenge that started with £500,000 in fake money. Ross Miami McGill thought he had pulled off the deal of a lifetime. The Dubai-based trafficker believed he had secured a massive £500,000 cocaine shipment. But when the payment arrived, McGill's world collapsed. Most of the payment was counterfeit, fake bills that weren't worth the paper they were printed on. For someone who had built his reputation on being untouchable, it was the ultimate humiliation. In the underworld, humiliation kills faster than bullets. McGill couldn't let this slide, not if he wanted to keep breathing. From his safe house in Dubai, he unleashed hell on Scotland. His Tamo Junto crew got their orders to burn everything connected to the people who had made a fool of him. What followed was terrorism, which they disguised as gang warfare. Homes exploded in the night. The crew worked their way through a hit list that stretched from Edinburgh to Glasgow, leaving destruction in their wake. Mark Richardson's associates were first, their properties torched as a warning. But McGill was not satisfied with the Edinburgh targets. He wanted the big fish. That's when the Daniels became targets. Annette's house in Bishopbriggs erupted in flames. Her brother Norman's bungalow was next, torched minutes later in a coordinated assault. But McGill's crew didn't stop at property damage. They went after people too, and they didn't care who got hurt. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted during a mistaken raid. Her only crime was being in the wrong place when violent men came calling. A 12-year-old boy was attacked in another case of mistaken identity, proof that this war had no rules and no limits. The violence was spreading like cancer through Scotland's underworld, but it wasn't staying in Scotland. In May 2025, the war jumped continents when 2 bullets changed everything. Ross Monaghan and Eddie Lyons Jr. were living the high life in Fuengirola, Spain, probably thinking they were safe from Glasgow's chaos. They were wrong. After watching the Champions League final, they were gunned down in Monaghan's own bar, executed in front of terrified tourists who had come for drinks and got a murder scene instead. Spanish police immediately linked the double killing to Glasgow's gang wars, but nobody could agree on who pulled the trigger. What everyone agreed on was that the killings were professional, which only meant this wasn't street-level violence. This was execution-style murder carried out by people who knew exactly what they were doing. The bodies came home to a funeral that looked more like a military operation. Over 500 mourners packed into Bishopbriggs. It stopped Scotland's criminal underworld for a while. In fact, that funeral became a recruiting rally for the next phase of violence. Everyone knew more blood was coming, the only question was when and where it would spill. Meanwhile, Scottish police are drowning in cases. Operation Portaledge is their elite response to gang warfare, and it has made 55 arrests connected to the feud. But the violence keeps escalating. Forensic teams are working around the clock, trying to connect the dots between the Glasgow firebombings, Edinburgh attacks, and Spanish murders. Every arrest seems to trigger 2 more crimes. The war has become international, with tentacles reaching from Glasgow housing estates, to Dubai skyscrapers, to Spanish beach bars. Police forces in 3 countries are sharing intelligence, but they are always one step behind men who have made violence their profession. This was the reality Annette faced every time she left her house. Not just legal troubles over stolen jumpers, but she is living in a full-scale war where family members are legitimate targets, and relatives can be murdered for wearing the wrong surname. Every court appearance meant risking her life, and every public sighting made her a potential target. When her lawyer told the sheriff she was too afraid to attend hearings, it was not a tactic to avoid her trial. It was a survival instinct in a world where being a Daniel could get you killed. The woman fighting shoplifting charges is really fighting for her life in a war that has already crossed oceans, and wouldn't end until everyone involved is either dead or in prison. But what should terrify everyone is that this bloodbath is just the opening act. If houses are already burning, bodies are dropping in foreign countries, and police are making arrests by the dozen, what the hell comes next? What kind of nightmare is brewing that we don't know about yet? Because if there is one thing Scotland's gang wars have taught us, it's that just when you think the violence cannot get any worse, someone proves you dead wrong. If you want to stay updated on the latest news of this brutal gang war, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Goodbye for now.